Are we live to the public with this?
Correct.
Ooh, that's why Frisch is wearing a nice shirt and tie.
Okay, so welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I think we should probably have elected officials from Comox First Nation, from the 3 municipalities, Courtenay, Comox, Cumberland, hopefully from the areas, ABC and Islands Trust and SD 71. So I'm calling from my home here in Cumberland, and I would like to acknowledge that most of us are likely calling from the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nation. This was a regular scheduled elected officials forum, but the topic, which is about Comox Valley Regional Emergency Program and our Emergency Operations Center, is obviously new. And it's a result of me getting a lot of questions from elected officials about their role with the EOC and where we fit as policymakers in this temporary governance structure that we have happening. And so today we've invited some guest speakers and 2 guest speakers, and we'll have also a talk from some of our EOC staff. So first on the docket is Al Richmond, and Al was elected to the Cariboo Regional District in 1993. He served 9 years as chair of the CVRD and 10 years as chair of the Cariboo-Chilcotin Regional Hospital District. He served as the executive on UBCM for a decade and served as president from 2015 to 2016. He has represented UBCM on the boards of FCM, the Fire Chiefs Association of BC, and the Provincial Fire Service Advisory Committee. And with that, I will pass it over to Al.
Well, thank you. And thank you very much, Jesse. And it's a pleasure to be here today to offer you just a little insight. Mostly I'm going to reflect on 2017 and some lessons we learned. The first thing I think the elected officials go through, and we did, was what is my role as director in this current situation? I need to be in the EOC. And the EOC is a technical operations center that makes recommendations to, in this case would be the chair, I assume is the person who's going to sign orders and evacuations, et cetera, et cetera. So, and that job falls to your elected leader. So you guys elect a chair each year. Normally, the spokesman for the EOC, from the policy point of view, when they're going to do something, it would be the chair or their designate. We do have the EOC director also speaks from time to time, but it's important to realize that even on the conference calls of 2017, when there was impending doom and gloom with the fires we had around Williams Lake, other than maybe one occasion, I was not on the joint conference call when the EOC met with the Forest Service. I got the sort of the briefed after the meeting because they keep it at a technical level and a non-political level. And you're not the only ones, like local officials are not the only ones that have issues. MLAs have issues not getting those briefings. They get separate briefings. One of the things, so also with respect to your EOC, when it's operating, you're limited to the money you have based on your task number. So you're going to get a task number from Emergency Management BC, and they're going to tell you what they're going to pay for, essentially. So your EOC director will be keeping on task with where the money's coming from to do some things, because the worst thing we can do, we all want to do more for people, but the costs get out of sight and you got to keep focused. And that's why the technical piece of the EOC operations and the Emergency Management BC are the people you need to be working with. In this case with COVID, of course, we're working closely and getting direction largely from the medical health officer and the Minister of Health. One of the things we learned very quickly on when we could get organized enough, because we had evacuations in Williams Lake, so we lost a bunch of our staff. And it was really a bit of a challenge to communicate. And so if you have all your files parked in the entrance to the regional district office, in case you had to evacuate, and the van sitting outside to take all those papers, and the current papers are already put into the vault in one of the banks. It's really kind of something that always haunts you all the time, and it distracts you from some of the work they're doing. But the biggest success we had was regular meetings and briefings of the board. And the board includes, of course, all also directors, all elected officials. So that includes your municipal representation, First Nations. We invite our MLAs to those briefings so they knew what they were doing. They could call in. They were all basically call-in meetings. And your MP and your school district, if they wanted to join in. So they got the same information you had. And the information coming from the ELC that was briefing your elected officials was getting to all the participants that you could possibly think of. And I may have missed someone that might be pertinent to your operation, but just generally that's what we did. We were a little late bringing the school district on. I was relied on the staff to have staff communication, but I would recommend bringing the school district on earlier rather than later. And of course, very important to keep your First Nations communities involved. One of the main tasks that the directors can do, while the EOC can use Facebook or Twitter or emails, however they do communicate with people, their message out, is that the EOC and your communications people should be providing you with speaking notes and messaging. And messaging, because what you want in the time of a crisis is consistency. You don't, the worst thing you can have is inconsistent information coming out. And we certainly saw that in the fires of 2017. You need to be consistent. And if you really have a problem with some of the messaging, then you need to call your chair directly and say, I'm having an issue with this, we need to change it. But on the outside to the public, it really does a huge disservice to the organization as a whole if there isn't unanimity and you stick to what the lines are, because the people in the ELC are pretty well briefed from the supply chains to delivery of services and delivery of emergency assistance to folks to be able to make the best recommendation on that. So you guys, some of you may do a newsletter. If you're like me, I do a newsletter. Well, now I do one every day, maybe twice a day. With the COVID stuff, even though we're not involved directly, other than regional district have been mandated to do some bylaw enforcement with respect to that. That's what the province has given to us as part of the COVID-19 piece, right? That's what they've said. So your bylaw enforcers need to go and deal with people who aren't keeping themselves out of the main way, or they're self-isolating is the word I'm looking for. But if you can receive consistent messaging from the ELC to deliver to your constituents, then you can do that on your Facebook pages, on your Twitter feeds, and your email distribution list. So that information coming from the corporation is being received as widely as possible. And again, I can't stress enough the need to support the people in the ELC and support the people who are having to convey the decisions being made. We're going through flooding right now, so it's not the time to have a debate with people in the ELC about how you're going to deal with the flooding. But consistency now, and if you have a real problem, take it offline to your chair and your CAO about how you're feeling about it. I think you need to be, you don't want to hold all that in. If you're really frustrated, you need to seek help and say, I'm frustrated by this, can we do better on something like that? There's nothing wrong with that. We did a lot of that through our, in 2017, through our basically nightly calls where all the directors came on board. And again, municipal as well as the rural directors came on board to be briefed by whoever was there and able to do it. In that case, it was a fire service. Sometimes you may be able to get briefings from your health officers directly in Comox. I'm not sure, but all I can say is that the consistent messaging and support for the people trying to do this job are key to being successful, delivering a good product to the people you all care about, because we may think we care more for our own constituents, but I think everybody in the organization cares about people. And that's what we want to be successful at delivering what people wish for. We cannot deliver, as I found in the fires of 2017, we can't be everything to everybody. We just don't have the capacity to do that. And some of that we have to rely on other organizations to provide. But consistent messaging, again, support for the people trying to do the job. And I don't know if you're familiar with the BSERMS operation, but I'm assuming your EOC works like most. They have BSERMS. It's a process, a provincial process. And we all might modify it slightly, but you know when you go in the room who does certain jobs. And they're the people who are best versed to do that job. So I think I've learned in years in being in politics, you learn more from listening than speaking. So I'll glad to take questions later and hand it back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Al. So I will open it up to questions, and so people can go to the participant list and use the raise hand button to get in a line for questions. And I see Arzina Amir. And I'm going to have to rely on Jake to unmute you.
I've got it, I think.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that presentation. Yeah, I think, you know, even as elected officials, we wish that the EOC could be everything for all of us as well. But I'm wondering, in your experience in 2017, are there aspects of the EOC that you wish had been covered that weren't? Like I noticed it's a very technical group, but were there issues around your emergency, maybe specific to fire or flood, that the EOC maybe didn't or had a blind spot in? And can you speak to like how like who took up those took up the reins in the areas that the EOC wasn't working on?
So I think the EOC was looking everywhere, but one of the sort of the issues that came up was particularly evacuation routes. And we would find that a director may know, I knew the country pretty well, but you'd find that actually sometimes the area director knew better than highways about a way to get out of an area. And so involving people, again, that's when, like, for example, if you're going to do an evacuation order, I would always phone the director. They would get a heads up before the order went out, and they would be briefed on the plans. And I took that on because we were short of staff, so I would communicate with the directors if there was something going on. We did learn in some cases where they were aware of roads out that were a better option than had been picked by the Ministry of Transportation and Highways, who are the people directing. So this is how we're going to close this highway down. This is how we're going to get you out. So that would be one, the biggest one I found was some local knowledge on the ground. And so we now try and truth that and ensure that involving a local director in some of that information to be sure. If you run it by them, they'll tell you, well, that road doesn't work anymore, it did work, or they know of other ways out that the ministry didn't. That was probably the biggest one. The other one was messaging and getting that message out as quickly as you can, and sharing that messaging and putting out messaging in a format that the directors could utilize in their own social media world.
Great points, thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions, I'll move on to our next speaker, who is Sybil Sanderson. Sybil's worked in emergency management since 1998 and was the emergency program coordinator for Cowichan Valley Regional District from 2009 to 2019. Sybil led training and ESC and EOC response for the regional emergency program, including 4 municipalities, 9 electoral areas, and worked with 8 First Nations through a variety of events, including 2009 flood that impacted 4 jurisdictions, and also the December 2018 windstorm. And with that, I'll pass it over to Sybil.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I had an opportunity to work through a number of regional events, and that was a really important experience for us. We were able to do that early on. We started in the 90s to go into a regional emergency program, and it has worked very, very well for us in the past. So this is, of course, a very different event. This the COVID-19, it's a pandemic response. So I wanted to kind of start us off by just kind of summarizing a little bit about, we've got the Government of Canada. They're providing federal support. They're collaborating with the provinces and the territories and determining response, the recovery, etc. Of course, the government of British Columbia, they have declared a provincial state of emergency, and that's an important piece for us as for you as elected officials to understand, is that when the province declares a state of emergency, then they are the ones that have all of those powers. It's so really important for us to understand where this pandemic where the control for this pandemic lies. For us as local authorities, we need to activate our regional EOCs so that we can collaborate with all of the different communities and make sure we have some consistent messaging going on. And then there's local grassroots organizations and support agencies that are working with impacted populations, as well as the federal and provincial programs that are being put out. So really a lot of our job in this kind of an event is really just to provide that consistent information. So I'm looking to see if I can change it. Jake, can you change it for me? Wonderful, thank you. So a couple of things I wanted to kind of outline is starting with the regional EOC responsibilities. In a regional EOC, we really want to gather situational awareness for all the different, in this case, it's national information, provincial information, and our local communities. We need to make sure that we understand what the various agencies are doing and interjurisdictionally what the coordination issues are, what are the concerns, what's going on in each of your communities. We need to make sure that we have that consistent communication, and certainly Director Richmond mentioned that. Very, very important to make sure that the messaging is going out the same all the way across. Well, some of the other things they might be doing is coordinating resource requests and tracking the costs depending on what's done. I know that there's been a number of different communities that have put forward expenditure authorization forms to the province, trying to get some support for different kinds of things. So it does depend on what's going on. Next slide, please. So going on specifically to the policy group, this first one, lead by example, that's a really important one. Whatever the messaging is, we in the EOC, you as elected officials, people are looking to you and saying, is this real? Do we need to be doing this? So really important for us to listen to what is the messaging that's coming out, what are the guidelines, and then actually following those ourselves and leading by that example. You do provide overall policy direction, and that's one of the things. Each local government has slightly different ideas about what policy is and what's operational. So there's going to be some give and take in that area, and I encourage you to breathe and just relax with that a little bit, because the reality is it is going to be a little tough. This is something that none of us have ever dealt with really before. Setting expenditure limits, right? So that's something that you may be doing in the moment, but it might be something you look at in the future to do ahead of time to have a little bit more fluidity in that situation. Authorizing declaration and state of local emergency. Because there's a provincial one, we do not need to do a state of local emergency. However, it is the one particular power that only elected officials can authorize. So something to keep in mind and have a good understanding of what that works like. You can provide input into the emergency public information. I know that Director Richmond mentioned about, that sometimes you're going to know something that maybe the EOC doesn't know. Please make sure that you're funneling that through your CAO, through to the EOC, rather than starting to contradict the messaging. You may be acting as a spokesperson. I believe Director Kettler, I believe you are the spokesperson for the community. That's great. So the rest of you, it's really important to just support all of that. And this last point here, remember, set realistic expectations now that you can stand by in the future. That's a really important one. As was mentioned, there's a lot of things we would love to be able to do. The challenge is that we always have to think of it not just as in what do we need to do now, but what kind of an impact is that going to have in the future? What kind of expectations is that going to set for the future? Because this is not the last event we're going to deal with. We will have others. So we need to always be thinking about, okay, if we're setting up this, this, and this, and this, so when the next thing happens, the next disaster, the next emergency, what kind of expectations are out there now for the public? Next slide, please. In terms of regional coordination, I know it's a little different than every jurisdiction doing their own thing, but it can be really, really beneficial. So ideally you have one regional EOC. It's impacted by, and it has representation from all the impacted as well as the high risk to be impacted jurisdictions. Some of the events that we went through, we actually had others that were not impacted that came in and joined in, because the advantage is that you then get a chance to practice your skills, because we don't do EOCs all the time. So it's a great opportunity. You're having one regional policy group. I know right now you have 4, but that's something that you may want to look at in the future. It is really important to have that cohesiveness. I don't know if any of you have ever been on a really big committee and you've kind of gotten frustrated because you're not having much luck making decisions, right? So again, the more people we involve in the decision-making process, the more challenging it becomes. And so again, though, your policy group should have representation from all of the impacted or high risk to be impacted jurisdictions. Having consistent policies and directions in terms of ensuring that there's fairness going on, that the decisions that are made are going to be fair to all the jurisdictions, and that can sometimes be a little tricky. But I encourage you to look at how does that work and how are your decisions going to impact the other communities. And then information should be shared with all elected officials. So there's a number of ways to do that. You might want to do weekly conference calls. You might want to have EOC briefings sent out. I totally agree with Director Richmond that we really need to make sure in our EOC that what the messaging that we send out should be very easy for the directors to pass on to their constituents. Next slide, please. Spokesperson role. So consistent messaging and information is really, really vital. EOCs develop and approve all the public information. Certainly we look to the directors for input into that, but at the end of the day, we don't want different messaging coming from different places. So important to have all that information funneling through your EOC for approvals. Ideally, 3 key messages is kind of what we found is effective, not having too many different messages coming out. And then empathy always needs to be our number one message. So making sure that what the public is hearing from us starts with, we care. Okay, next slide. Elected officials role. So those that are maybe not in the policy group, certainly retweet and share all of the public information that you're getting from the EOC. If you have issues or concerns that you become aware of, ideas, whatever, make sure that you go through your CAO to get that to the EOC for consideration. And then one of the things I do want to caution you on is sometimes we get really excited and we get information from some other source and we just want to start putting that in there. And I'm just going to caution you on that. Please check it out with your EOC. That's a big part of their job, is to make sure that the information that we're sharing is factual, it's accurate, and it's going to give the right kind of message, because one of the things we don't want is innuendos and rumors and things floating out there. So I'm going to encourage you, before you start retweeting and sharing other information or even putting your own twist on things, make sure that you've checked it out with the EOC to make sure it is what you want to hear. Okay. I think that might be the last slide. So open to questions.
All right, thank you so much, Sybil. And again, if you have a question, go ahead and use the raise hand function in the participant list. And I guess if you're on the phone, you can just unmute yourself and alert me to your presence and your question. So I see Director Hamir. Go ahead.
I guess I'm the only one who can use the button right now, but thank you again for that presentation, Sybil. And I'm going to ask you the same question, maybe choosing, if you don't mind, I guess the storm in Cowichan, I think, is maybe something a little bit closer to us. If you have any points that you found like through your EOC, surprises or things that came up unexpected during that emergency that were learnings for the future.
I think, yes, there were a number of things that we learned. Certainly one of the things was that because of everybody being cut off from each other, and we hadn't really gotten into a lot of the electronics like we are with this event, we didn't always have the kind of information that we need about what the impacts were to community. We also didn't realize that there were a number of different hubs that were growing in the community. So for example, just as an example, in Lake Cowichan, the country grocer, they were fabulous and they became a hub. They started providing food, cooking hamburgers and hot dogs for everybody, and doing things like that. So that made them a hub. And so one of the things that we started working on after the fact was identifying what were those hubs in the various smaller communities that we as the EOC could reach out to, and we could provide them with those updates so that they would have something that they can share with the people that were coming to them.
That's a great point. And is that something that the EOCs are kind of trained to look for, or is that like looking for hubs that are happening in the community, or is that something you just found through your connections in the Cowichan area?
It's something that we learned as a result. And part of that is because just like this pandemic, it's a very different event than what we had before. Most other events, it's a very localized issue. It's a fire or it's a flood or something along those lines. And so you're getting firsthand information from the field. In a big event like the windstorm that we had in 2018, as well as this pandemic, it's not so easy. It's all over, it's spread all over the place. And so it's hard to figure out, where do I get the information from? Where are the issues? Where are the concerns? So that's something that I think as EOCs we're waking up to and looking at how can we better get information from the communities.
Thank you.
So Jesse, I could just add to Sybil's comment, if you don't mind. One of the things you can do as director is you're aware of those food hubs, those hubs that get created. And I admitted one of those in 2017. We had hubs set up all over the place, and people from outside the area were contributing food and all kinds of toiletries and other basic necessities for people. And we learned about those through the directors. The EOCs aren't necessarily in touch with them because they'll pop up in your community. When they aren't necessarily communicating directly with the EOC, they're not into that structure, but they may be communicating with you as a local politician. We had, in the case of 2017, we had people evacuated. We had no, with two municipalities shut down, emptied basically. We had no pharmacy, we had nothing. So we had doctors that came in from Kamloops that we got passes to come in, and they held clinics in community halls and wrote prescriptions. And I told the EOC about that. And then later, a number of directors, myself, we coordinated having people actually go out and get medication and come back in because they needed that. So that is the role, that you can really assist without interfering with the EOC, let them know what's going on. But the EOC wouldn't necessarily be focused on those groups that are sort of popping up to try and help. We had a big food distribution center in Forest Grove and in Lac La Hache and other locations throughout the fires of 2017 and the other issues we've had.
Thank you for that. So we do have another question from Director Morin.
Great, thank you, Chair, and thank you so much, Sybil and Al, for your presentations today. I did bring this up on another call a couple weeks ago with Island Health representative in terms of kind of debriefing after the fact and sort of what would be mechanisms to provide feedback to the province after these events. And I'm wondering if you had those opportunities and to give feedback on what worked, what didn't work, what needed to be added in future, that kind of thing. And if so, have you found follow through on those kinds of actions? Did that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just wondering who wants to answer first.
Okay, I'll bite if you want, Sybil.
Sure.
We, right now, we're going through flooding and other issues. We'll do it. First of all, one of the important people to debrief in this is what you're talking about. What went right, what went wrong? Because nothing will ever go 100% the way you want it to, and you wish you'd done something different. As we'll go to communities, and we did that through the fires of 2017, bringing as many of the support agencies in to talk to the people who give you a pretty raw version of what they saw happen or didn't happen. And so you take that feedback, and we did a pretty exhaustive process in 2017, and we usually do a debrief with the community. So right now they're preparing for community debriefs with respect to flooding. The COVID situation is a little different because it's not ours to manage. Our role in it's kind of small, right? But I think it would behoove us and your board to get together to talk about what you might push back to the ministry about what could have worked better. I think the province is fortunate with a great spokesperson right now. Dr. Henry doing, I think, a wonderful job. And I think you've seen between her and the minister be a pretty formidable team at getting that message out. And you'll see the consistency that's happening and the support that's there. So I think as a board, you guys need to sit down at a cow meeting and just have a heart to heart and say what went well, what didn't go well, and what more do we need so that we can be helpful participants in this. But that's so for the board could certainly get that input with the EOCs. Our EOC usually does a debrief amongst themselves as well. So I think after your EOC shut down, you'll probably find whoever's your EOC director will convene all the people at EOC, and they'll do a debrief because they'll be looking too. What went well, what didn't go well. Gee, I wish this could have gone better.
Thanks. I think you made an important point that a variety of perspectives is useful because the EOC may have information that the board doesn't have, or they've got some learnings. But then we do hear from the community, so I think that it's helpful to kind of provide that broader overview. Thanks.
And do you have anything to add, Sybil?
Sure. In our communities, I know that we had community meetings, the town halls where the people could tell us about how they were experiencing the situation, what they thought could go better. We certainly have debriefs as part of the EOC, as well as emergency support services. And then one of the things that we do after the fact is look at all of that information that we've gathered, develop an after action report. And ideally a summary of that if it goes to the board, to the councils, so that they have a copy of that, because there may be some specific things that can be changed. But then that also gives us an opportunity to share that with the province if there's a choice to do that. In addition, here on Vancouver Island, we have an advantage because we're part of a group called the Mid-Island Emergency Coordinators and Managers. And we actually have provincial representation sitting at our table. So we not just after a major event like this, but in all kinds of situations, we do have the ear of the province. And so we are talking to people from Emergency Management BC on a regular basis.
Great, thank you. I think Mayor Baird is next on the speakers list. Do you have a question, Mayor Baird?
To the EOC, is there a time frame about when we should hear back on whether it's a positive or a negative for what we are requesting? I would just like to hear from Sybil and Al to how they carried that out. Was there a time frame when a municipality asked for something of an EOC, like closing down parks or opening up parks or anything like that? I know that's meeting has to meet the provincial guidelines, but what is the process is what I'm asking them that they have gone through.
Okay.
I know Wendy touched on it a bit, but I'd like a little bit more on that.
So working between the EOC and the municipalities?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things we've always done is we've made sure that we actually have representation in the EOC from the municipality so that we get that direct feedback. And then we've always encouraged that certainly, and this one's been a little different, I gotta tell you, this COVID-19 is a little different than what we normally do. But in normal situations, when we have wildfires or floods or things like that, your public works, for example, they are a key, or your fire departments, those are the key response agencies that we have in normal events. And so really what an EOC does in that situation is actually they're telling us that those responders are telling us what they need. And so rather than the other way around. And so we're actually in normal situations, we're actually the ones that are being very responsive, trying to get in touch with them. And part of that process is we have formal request forms that are used that can attach a time frame. Now, in terms of how it's specifically being done with the COVID-19, which is a little different, particularly as you mentioned, closing parks, again, it could be something put into that says we'd like to have a response by such and such a time or something. But I think that especially with this event, I think we need to be a little flexible with that, and because there are going to be challenges, it's not as straightforward.
As someone who likes timeframes and processes, it's been a little difficult. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and Al, do you have anything to add to that?
Not really. Although the EOC, the director tries to set the priorities and what they need to be doing at the time, what they're focusing on. Certainly, we didn't have the closed park issues, but normally the mayors and myself would chat if they had an issue, and I would bring it to the EOC director's attention, and they would take it into the EOC. Again, that chain of command type format that goes. So the politicians outside were having conversations, myself and the mayors, on a fairly regular basis. If they had an issue, I'd bring it up. If I had an issue, I'd call them. Then the other default to that is if you really have a really big issue, then you talk to your CAO to talk to the CAO of the regional district and work away on an administration level. So.
Yes, and we'll hear next from EOC staff as to the structure there and the municipalities being represented by their CAOs. But we do have another question first, Director Hamir.
Yeah, thank you. And I think my question was very similar to Mayor Baird's. I am noticing that for this emergency, we tend to the EOCs tend to wait for certain triggers from the province before they do certain things. And I guess there's pros and cons of either. And that was my question: is in what situation might you want to push something up from the local level to do certain actions, and in what situation would you wait? Like, I'll give you an example. I think that many of us are very concerned about recovery right now, but I guess we're waiting for the province or the federal government to release some funding around that. So we're a bit hesitant to move on recovery. And so we're trying to get this balancing act of when do you wait and when do you push? Do you have any advice on that, or any examples from your communities? And that's for both Al and Sybil.
I mentioned that I didn't believe it's a good time to hold anything back, but the chain of how you get that information to your chair or to the EOC director is what the concerns are. I don't think someone should sit and let something fester because it brings out other things in people that get agitated by, it could all be maybe solved very quickly. So I would say that bring it forward is never, there's no silly questions. There's no stupid questions. If you have a question or you don't have it, you need to let people know about it. So maybe it's something they hadn't considered. We had so many people in our EOC at some points that we had First Nations, we had Finesse and all the other ones in there. It was very confusing, and the directors would bring things forward. They usually brought things forward either to me or to the EOC director because they were given a line to call in. Here's my concern. This is what's happening. They won't necessarily know, nor will the province necessarily know exactly what's going on. And that's what I said earlier. You're the voice of the community, and you can bring it forward in an articulate and appropriate manner to voice the concerns of what you're hearing out there. I heard them during the time, and there were some things we could do something about, some things we couldn't do something about. But I think that you're the voice of your constituents. And if they feel there's something isn't being addressed, you need to make the people in the EOC and your chair aware of your concerns. And that way they can deal with it. And it hasn't sat at home with you and you're saying, oh, I wish they'd do something about this one. Maybe it's something they would do something about, right? So that would be my suggestion.
I would agree with that. One of the things that you may not be aware of is that there is a lot of stuff going on in EOC. And one of them, for example, under planning, there are two functions. One is advanced planning, so looking ahead at the next few days, the next week sort of thing. And then there's a recovery unit. And so a lot of the EOCs are already starting to grapple with that. The challenge with the COVID-19 is that we can't just start running with that without that provincial direction. And so that's where, although most of them are already working on that, trying to figure out how do we do this? How would we do that? We do actually need to have the actual information from the province, the guidelines. What are they going to allow opening? What are they not going to allow opening? All that stuff. Unfortunately, they are in control of that one. So yes, lots of EOCs, and I'm sure that Russell can look into that more deeply for you, but it is something, in fact, our training tells us we should be starting to consider what recovery is going to look like and what we need to be doing in recovery on day 2.
Great. Thank you both.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up. So we'll go to our last couple speakers, which are Russell Dyson, CAO of the Comox Valley Regional District and Director of the EOC, and Howie Siemens, who's our Emergency Program Coordinator.
Hello, directors, and Chair Kettler, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
We have the black screen of death here in the room, just momentarily. It's happened before in tonight's meeting, and I'm assured that you still have access to our presentation and obviously my voice.
We can't see a presentation yet.
Okay, so it's coming. Jake's got it under control. I'll just give a brief introduction. And first of all, I want to express my appreciation to all of you attending this meeting tonight and your interest in our EOC operations. And that includes, as I understand, Island Trust, KFN, school district, council members, mayors, directors, and the chair. So thank you very much for this time and your interest. In advance of this meeting and on the agenda, we circulated to you a 6-page fact sheet. I just want to express my appreciation for the staff of the municipalities in the regional district, and especially those in communication that put these materials together. What we thought best illustrates and describes this current situation and tries to compare it to the function of a normal EOC. So tonight, Howie and myself will present to you a mere 6 slides. We'll share in this presentation. We'll start with Howie and providing you with a little bit of insight, and then I'll speak to the structure of a typical EOC in this one, and then we'll answer your questions. So next, I'll pass it over to Howie, and Howie, you can just prompt Jake when to advance the slides.
Okay, I think we might have the technical issue fixed up, so we'll give it a try. Can everybody hear me okay? Not? Okay, great. Thank you. Thumbs up. Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present. I'm going to give you, and thank you for Sybil and Director Richmond for their overview of an EOC. I think the sort of the disclaimer is an EOC in the perfect world. We are now working in a COVID EOC, which I'm going to sort of provide you a little bit of more comparison to what that looks like. It really, what we really went into this event for was a little bit different for us. We usually, as Sybil and Al had alluded to, we usually look at our first responders or an event in our community like a fire or flood that gives us kind of a very clear direction of what is occurring to us. This one really, it wasn't really in our community for us to take leadership on. It was a provincial health event, pandemic. And so we were really trying to figure out what will be our role. And the main part of that is really to support what initiatives and directives that came from the provincial health. So what we decided to do was really in this model, we had tried to adapt the EOC environment because an EOC environment works really well for structural capabilities to provide processes, having a lot of key participants with knowledge and experience to help look at a problem in our community and seeing what we can come up with some solutions to that, and then how do we do it? How do we address them? Through some of the tools like action plans and situation reports that Sybil had alluded to. So what our main focus of the EOC was really to look at providing an environment where we could start our communications, looking at a regional approach to it to support each other in that messaging, as well as looking at some kind of collaboration. When we first started this, there was really no direct tasks for the EOC, but a lot of tasks for business continuity with reduction of staff, facilities that had to close. How do we address the preventative measures that were coming out of the health orders, like closing parks or playgrounds? All those kinds of decisions, but really were about business continuity. And so we started some of the collaboration teams that we had developed into our org chart, which is very much a hybrid of an EOC. It's never been, I've seen, done before in the history that I've been doing this for many years, and Sybil probably could speak to that as well. So again, the secondary purpose of this was actually to, again, have a regional approach, a regional collaboration, working with all the local governments, representing all of them in the community. So that we could hear their challenges, what their communities might be facing, and then hopefully in a collaborative group, is come up with some kind of solutions or directions that we could follow. So let's just see if I can get this to it. Oh, we got it to work, great. So the purpose of our EOC was really to do support for the guiding of the principles of Ministry of Health and the emergency management, emergency decks and orders that came out. So how are we going to do that? Again, was just to provide a regional approach for local governments to work in, providing that essential component. I think the key strength that we had going into this, we had a very strong EOC communications team working in collaboration with the City of Courtenay and the CVRD's communications managers and staff, and developed a very much a clear messaging that supported the island health or provincial health in getting their messages out to our communities and to our workforces. I think that was one of the biggest keys that we had. The other component was really looking at the advanced planning unit, as Sybil mentioned, looking ahead at not just what we were addressing as each order or preventative measure came down, but also what we needed to do looking, 2-3 days out, a week out. And as we're looking at right now, which I really have to use the word recovery with air quotes, because this is not recovery that we're in, the normal standard of recovery that I've been involved in over the years after fires and floods. And we don't want to give the wrong sense that, to the community or to our employees that we're working with that are trying to get back to some level of operation, is because Dr. Henry has made it very clear is that we're not leaving COVID right now. There are preventative measures that will be in place for a longer period of time. So we are not in a recovery mode. And we are working with the province right now to find out some very good terminology or phrases that we can use, a definition of what this really looks like. Because if we start saying recovery to businesses and communities, they'll get the wrong sense that we're going right back to normal. And as you all know, we're not seeing a normal. It might be a new normal in the way we do business, but not a normal in the community aspect of that. So with that, really, our key parts of that is looking at coordination with advanced planning, looking at the regional shortage of critical service personnel or equipment they need, facility closures or reopening of those facilities, and intercommunication and support requests that might come from you as the directors, questions that we'll go back to the EMBC, to health to try to find answers, or bring back the challenges that we might also face as emergency coordinators or EOC staff. And with that, I will throw it to Russell to talk a little bit about the, if I can get the slide to go over for him. Oops, sorry. Oh, going the wrong way.
Leave it up to Jake.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to have to, because it looks like he's got control. So Russell will start to give more defined definitions of what the EOC structure looks like and some of the decision-making processes as well.
Thank you very much. And Howie will also provide more information, and you can ask questions of either one of us once we're done. So I'd just like to explain our EOC organization chart. That is the one that we are serving you with in this current circumstance. I'd like to say that what we are doing within this regional district isn't common in all regional districts. Here, there is a collaboration where the 3 municipalities in the regional district are coordinating within one EOC. There are many regional districts where that's not the case, where individual municipalities have their own. And certainly it's a matter of what works best in the circumstance. I would just like to give a shout out to this model. If this model were followed throughout the province, that would mean only 27 EOCs in the province. That would mean a far greater connectivity with the province. That would mean far better information, but nonetheless, that's not the case. So we all are left scrambling a little bit to get the resources of the province and an understanding and have them within our EOCs, but that just isn't possible given all that are operating at this time. So to speak of our EOC, this is what would be a level 2. It's not a complete level 3, but you see each one of the functions are filled. And a very important element is the box on the left, that is the agency organization liaisons. So within the EOC, each one of the municipalities has a liaison, and that individual brings forward information or requests from the municipality and or takes information from the EOC back to the municipality. In the very early stages of this event, those roles were fulfilled by each one of the CAOs. So in the very early days of developing our action plans, procedures, practices, and priorities, each one of the CAOs was there in the room and doing it. As things have progressed and our requirements have diminished a little bit, that's freed up the CAOs to lean on or rely on their liaisons. But each municipality has that. In this circumstance, we have the fortunes of having a few other organizations at the table: the RCMP, the Coalition to End Homelessness, School District 71, 19 Wing, the Comox Valley Fire Chiefs Association. Each one of these agencies have been regular attendees that have taken the information and brought information forward. On somewhat of an irregular basis, we've had a representative from Island Health. Next to this box are very key positions, and that is our information officers. We've had the good reliance of staff from both the City of Courtenay and the Regional District working as a team within our communications. And they have been supported by our liaison officers. This has included George Dirksen, and who for the most part has presented the situation reports that I'll speak to a little bit later in our presentation. And also Howie, that helps coordinate amongst all the liaisons. The 4 sections within this level 2 include operations, planning, logistics, and finance. Many of these individuals are here tonight, and if you have questions specific to those, we have James Bast, we have representatives of our planning unit, including Kaylin Chambers. Our logistics chief, Scott Hainsworth, is not here tonight, but we do have Beth Dunlop, who has acted as a financial team assistant, or pardon me, the chief of our financial section over a period of time. These are very important roles, as Howie has illustrated, and I think we've heard from Sybil too, the importance of the planning section in terms of situation reports, presenting the information, analyzing information as to what's factual so that can be reported out by the information officers, as well as advanced planning, looking forward to what the priorities are and informing us so that I can inform the CAOs of where our priorities should be moving forward. Next slide. So that explains the EEOC organization. Now I'd like to explain the role of the policy groups and what we have working within this current situation. The regional district is a service provider. We have the emergency preparedness function. We have two functions, one that provides for the electoral areas and another one which provides service to all of the regional district, including the 3 municipalities. We deliver that through contract. We have a contract for service as opposed to the municipalities being service participants. That's the framework within which we work. In this incident or in this circumstance, as has been mentioned, we have a multitude of policy groups. We still retain the policy groups as the 3 municipal councils and the regional district board. It wouldn't necessarily be this way in an event which was more impactful of our services. In the event of an earthquake, a major flood, the contamination that was localized or otherwise, what we might see is the formation of a single policy group that helps to make decisions and for which the director reports to. But under the pandemic and under this model, the EOC director reports to the CAOs who in return report to each of the council members. But as I mentioned previously, in the model that we have with the EOC, we have a very strong link in which the CAOs are there and engaged, and or they have their liaison representing them. So if there are issues that are individual to one of the communities, they can bring those forward and we as a group can decide whether that's an action that we will work on collaboratively or whether an individual community will act upon themselves. I've strengthened or boldened the line between the EOC director and the CVRD board because that represents the relationship that the director has to the service provider. We have supported that throughout this event by the EOC director, whether that was me or when it was David Allen, by providing the updates to our Comox Valley Regional District Board. And then I just want to speak a little bit to a number of other groups that are out there. For instance, the Leaders Group. The Leaders Group is a group where MPs, MLAs, the RCMP, Department of National Defense, School District 71 meet with members of the 4 policy groups, the mayors and chairs, and they share or collaborate on information. That's been happening once a week. There's a multitude of other little groups. There's the regular meetings with Charmaine ends or otherwise, all of which help to inform policy members of the activities that are happening with respect to this event. So that explains a little bit of the role of the policy groups. I can answer any questions, but I'll just go back to Howie for one more slide, and then I'll follow up with talking about the situation reports and their importance.
Great, thanks, Russell. So my slide is on the Emergency Operations Center communications during the pandemic. And what we have found is this has been the most important, I think, piece to help support all the local governments in actually understanding and analyzing a lot of the information that's coming from the province, the health, emergency management BC. I know I spent many a night reading very large documents that would be released on trying to give us some direction on what orders are coming down and trying to create some kind of summary so that we could actually understand what our clear, if we had clear directives of any kind. So, but what I'm very thankful for is we've had an incredible communications team that has taken some of that information and actually boiled it down to the point that Sybil had said, making it 3 or 4 key messages so that it is easy for you as directors and spokesperson Chair Kettler to be able to provide that out to the to community and in support of Island Health. When we first started this initiative, it we were having a struggle trying to get key messages from Island Health and key clear directives of what support they wanted from us. So we were trying to be proactive in taking what was coming out in George's collection of information that started at 7 in the morning and ended, it seemed some nights for him at 5 or 6 o'clock at night, and then hours of putting a summary together, which we then distribute to all the directors. So we could help everybody be in the same page and be in the know. So that is the key piece, I think, for us in the EOC, is ensuring that we're using our informational officers to really support the EOC director, the CEOs, as well as you as elected officials. And that communication works both ways. Is when you hear of something in the community you're not sure of, or you're wanting to verify, is throw it back into the EOC and our informational teams, or George or myself, our EOC liaisons, will go out and make sure it's factual information, because that's our job in the EOC as well, is to ensure that when you're out there representing the community, be it your local community or the regional EOC, is that the information you're sharing is the most accurate information to the public and to even our employees that are being impacted by this event as well. And over to you, Russell.
Is there one more? Try. Oh. So I just wanted to talk about situation reports, and it really emphasized what Howie has just spoken about. And these are the daily reports that we then share with the chair, and then the chair shares with you. And just as Howie has said, the amount of effort that goes into these to ensure that we can provide factual information that is up to date, that reflects federal, provincial, local, Island Health, or our own internal knowledge and understanding of the matter, that we can share with you, and then you can drive out to the public and share with them. There is just a ton of information in any emergency, and the use of social media today generates a ton of ideas and concepts as to what's happening. Facebook, the news media, there's all sorts of different information. What we try to do is wade through it all, and within those situational reports, give you the factual information that you can rely on. It doesn't necessarily enable you to respond to each and every question that may arise, because some of that may be coming from untraditional sources or information that isn't tested, but you can always turn to this as factual information to share with the public. We also share with you a number of links in terms of best practices, resources, business programs, or otherwise that might be coming out that might be relevant to our public, that we then in turn make available from our web page, or each of the municipalities may also share too. So that's what we try to do. I'd just like to wrap up with just demonstrating at this time, today's EOC met, and there were 3 issues that came forward. One was with respect to playgrounds, and should playgrounds be back up and running in the Comox Valley. And last week, the CAOs put it to our recreation and parks managers, who met as a collaboration. They met over a period of time, took a look at all the information available to them, what the province was recommending or otherwise, and came forward with a recommendation to us today. That has been shared with the CAOs, and we will come up with the decision as to whether we will work together as a coordinated effort and then communicate that as a coordinated effort. The advantage being to our public that one message comes out and it's consistent in terms of the same play apparatus being treated the same in each one of our communities. And what we are doing is we anticipate that tomorrow there will likely be some advice coming from the province as to how things have changed and how people will be allowed to be out and about in the environment. That may not speak specifically to playgrounds, but there's likely some relevant information that we can then in turn apply to messaging that may see playgrounds open up here shortly. But it is our intention to follow the good advice of our managers, those that are looking after these facilities, that will have to implement and communicate it to the public, and being consistent with the province. So that's how that decision is playing out. And then the other thing that we're doing is we're looking at a collaboration in terms of, okay, now that our facilities are going to open up, the fact that our municipalities are going to have to collect taxes, are there best practices? Are there things that we can share as a collaboration in terms of opening up, providing our facilities the capacity? So there will be a bit of a collaboration team working on that. And then finally, the other thing, Jake, that we are looking at, we're drawing a blank, but those are two examples of how either a municipality may bring forward an idea like, is it time to open up the play structures? The EOC through their collaboration teams and the expert advice of our staff that are working together from each of our municipalities in the region of Lister work together with a recommendation. And then when a decision is made, communications is there to help support that. So that's it for Howie and I, and we're open to any of your questions.
Okay, I see Director Arbor has his hand up.
Thank you so much. And sorry, Russell, you just opened the door for a joke for me, because I think the third item was special attention to Hornby and Denman Island, correct?
That was, but only if I can come and give you a hug, and I'm waiting on the Premier to let me know.
Yeah, that's right. No, I just, jokes aside, I think I really appreciate the presentation today, and to all other people on the line, like, I just want to say, because it's tough in meetings, it's easier to do, but I just want to show the appreciation for all the work of the last month and a half. The EOC has been, and especially the value of the regional approach. I think we have delivered a consistent message across our communities. People have come on board, and when there was things unique to each of our communities, they were addressed through the framework. So yeah, so I just want to say a kudos to all of us really for that work. But the second piece I would say is maybe if staff or can give, I know that tomorrow is a bit of quite a consequential day around the Premier Horgan's announcement of the framework. But I want to ask if some of the staff at the EOC have had discussions around how the EOC might transition into that new zone that we're entering, and whether you would make adjustments in how we've been operating, or whether you just think we're just going to keep things as they are and keep the structures as they exist.
Thank you very much for that question. And absolutely, tomorrow's, as any time the province announces anything, will be reflected upon, and we will consider how that will apply to us and what the resources are. The third thing that's been put out to the CAOs, I just looked at the email, was what is our collaboration on recovery? And as Howie alluded to, the province just on Monday is starting to put their mind to advising us in terms of recovery and how we respond. And first and foremost, as Howie mentioned, it's the terminology to make sure it's consistent. So yes, tomorrow will very much educate or inform us as to what our recommendations are, and we will be coming back to the policy groups if we see a broader or different role with respect to the EOC and operations. And certainly in the back of our minds in our planning section is very good at this, at thinking ahead, is thinking second waves and what to do in the event that things do turn, not only with respect to how things operate tomorrow, but in the future.
Russell, may I add?
Yes, absolutely, Howie.
Yeah, so I just want to let you also know that the other part of this is the recoveries. We are also looking as the emergency program at seasonal readiness for wildfire season. And I know in our last probably conversation we did have with all the directors was that Donna McPherson out of the wildfire branch was indicating low risk at this time, is because the factors of it is low based on their survey of information. However, on a call this morning, they are projecting a higher than normal risk to British Columbia for wildfire season. So even though we're trying to figure out what wave of recovery or whatever the terminology will be used for COVID-19, is a lot of us in the room are also thinking, what if we are inundated to help other communities who are now going to be affected by wildfire? Will the island be affected by wildfire, or will we be affected and inundated by smoke? So we're already thinking way ahead on the process right now.
Okay, thank you. We do have another question from Laura Bushikin. Laura, are you there?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. Yep. I was just waiting to be unmuted. Yes. Thank you. It's Beshaken, but anything
My
approximate will do.
apologies.
That's okay. It's a challenging one. If you don't know me and you're just starting to know me. I was interested to hear about the discussion about the playgrounds, and that brought up a question for me. If there isn't, I mean, if the question is there an option for a local EOC to deviate slightly from a message coming down from the province? So if the province hasn't said, yes, playgrounds can be opened, what kind of discussion can happen here that might not, why would be, I guess, why or how can we talk about opening playgrounds if the province hasn't said we can?
I'll start with that, and how you might want to provide some perspective too. But as we were on a call with Dr. Charmaine Enns today, and she reminded us that it was not mandated that playgrounds close. Those were decisions that were made by local governments. But in the context of that decision, we saw many local governments go forward with this across the province and do this. I think we were also seeing school district limiting access at the same time when these decisions were being considered. And certainly our minds were at the time were on the fact that how do we manage them being open with limited staff, and the community's concern that it was just a place for which people were congregating and not meeting those social distancing rules. So I think the decision is that of local government to decide when, but it certainly will be better informed if we do it following tomorrow's advice as to how social distancing will be relaxed, if at all. And then our messaging can incorporate any key messages that we hear from the province. And I would just like to say, and I think this has been said before, but really emphasize that this event is like any others. If this were a wildfire, BC Forest would be coming to the EOC and saying, we have plans to do a burn back or undertake a certain message, and the EOC would be given the heads up before that became public. But in this circumstance, we are responding to actions taken by the province as they are made public, and there's no other way for them to do that in this circumstance. That's obvious, but it just is a bit of a challenge for us.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful.
Okay, are there any other questions? Are there any ideas about how we could do things better? Do you all like the structure that we've chosen, with the municipalities all having one EOC as opposed to different separate ones? All good? That's great. Well, I'd like to thank both Sybil and Al for sharing their experience and giving us more information on what other areas and regions are doing. And thanks to our staff today for their help and clarifying everybody's roles. And I wish you all a good afternoon.
Right, thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Hey, everyone.